Do you ever feel like your priorities are kind of out of whack? Or maybe you just kind of have them wrong? Or you need to do a reset? If that's the case, this is the episode for you. Let's get into it. If you think being a dad is filled with rewards, challenges, or headaches, and you keep pushing forward because you know this is the most important job you're ever going to do, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dad's All In podcast. Hey, fellow dad. Hope you're doing great out there, and the week has been going amazing for you, my friend. In this episode, we're going to talk about priorities. It is so difficult to consistently manage the priorities in your life. It really goes down to balance, trying to balance everything. But there is something you can always do to help reset your priorities and help you with decision making. We're going to get into that today for sure. So as a father, obviously your top priorities are going to be your family. Some of you will say my faith is top priority, then my family, and that's understandable as well. But any way you cut it, especially your kids, your spouse, they're going to be the focus, the main focus in what you're doing in your life. However, so many things, so many distractions, so many responsibilities pull us away from what those specific priorities are as far as the top of the pyramid for us, and it pulls away the importance, and we kind of fool ourselves into thinking some of these other things are just as important. You see, you probably have a list. You may have never written it out, but you have one in your head of priorities. But what happens a lot of the times when life in the rat race that we're all doing, our priorities get mangled, not because anything we're doing purposely, but it's because it's life. It's how it works. And you get pulled in all kinds of different directions and you get busy with all kinds of different things. And it's just important to maybe hit reset, because what you want is the action that's happening in your life to match up with what your list is. If you've never, by the way, written and making an actual list of priorities in your life, even if it's just your top 5, highly suggest you do it. The first couple are pretty easy. And then after that, you're probably going to list work on there in some capacity. And then it's going to get a little cloudy. And you really start to look at, family, friends, and then what? What's the priority next? Don't forget yourself on there, right? Like, it's easy to lose the focus on ourselves if we're pouring into everybody else in our lives, at home, at work, in any facet where you're doing anything. It's just easy to lose focus on yourself. But here's the thing. You don't want to have too much focus on yourself either, because then it pulls from your other priorities that are important. It's all about balance. So let's dive into some things you can do to help you match up your actual consistent action portion of your life with the list that you create. Now, when we're talking about balance, you're never, at least I don't think you will, you're never going to hit like a Yoda moment where you're like, oh, here we are. I'm balanced now. Everything is good. But you're definitely going to know when things are all out of whack, and it's because it's been tilted way too far from one end to the other. If you hit a point in your life where you're like, yeah, this is perfect. Like, I've got it. I got a groove now. Things are going perfectly. Count yourself lucky, because many people don't even hit that. You're just trying to get close to some kind of balance in your life. And there are work-related responsibilities, community-related responsibilities, obviously responsibilities at home with your family, maybe with organizations or faith-based organizations, whatever it is that's pulling you in all these different directions. Sometimes you feel like Gumby. I'm dating myself here a little bit, because obviously some of our younger listeners have no idea who that is. It's like this old school character made of like some kind of gum material, and he could stretch. So you get stretched out way too thin. And then what happens is you feel like you're failing at everything. So what do you do to balance your life? Well, let's start with what's your top priority. The thing that I always go back to, and I learned this a long time ago, is before I make big decisions or even small decisions, I run through my head, what's the most important priorities here? Is this going to take away from my family? And if so, is my family going to be okay with it? Are they going to support this? Or is this something that I need to kind of relook at and say, maybe this isn't that important? You do this definitely when you're making big decisions. about a year ago, I switched jobs and I went to work at a college. But before we did that, really had to sit down and think, well, is this the right decision, not just for me? Yes, it was something I wanted to do, but was it the right decision for our family? Because we have a family where if we don't have two parents who are dialed in, everything will crumble. And that's because of the amount of challenges we face in our family. And I'm not diving into all that. I will talk about that in an episode coming up soon. But in general, I have to make sure that I don't get pulled too far away. But going into a new job, I knew there was going to be a lot of times when I was going to have to learn and work outside of my work hours. That's just kind of par for the course when you take a new gig. And that was the case. But we had a family meeting. We got everybody's input, including, especially my wife, but including our kids. We decided it was the right time, it was the right opportunity, and we went for it. And I'm glad we did. I've loved working with college kids. But again, it goes back to kind of mentally checking your priority list. Is this decision important? What happens a lot of times with dads, just guys in general, some of the things that we are interested in unintentionally shoot up our priority list. What it ends up doing is it ends up taking up more time, in many cases takes time away from family. The first thing I'm thinking of is like working out. Is it important to work out? Yes, keep yourself healthy. But do you need to hit the gym, for 3 hours at a clip, knowing that, if it's going to bleed into all the time you have with your family, I'm not sure that's the best use of all your time, right? You could probably work out for an hour, spend the rest of your time with your family doing fatherly stuff, right? Fantasy football is another one that jumps off. Fantasy baseball, especially, because that has a ton of time and it goes for months. At least fantasy football, there's mainly games on the weekends, and that's about it. But in general, I guess maybe gambling and any vices, things that pull your attention away from your pyramid of priorities. And when that happens, it is harder to keep your eye on the prize, which is consistently being there to help your kids, consistently being there to help your family. But you can hit a reset button. And so I'm going to share this quick story with you about something that happened to me even before I became a dad. And this was absolutely the priority reset that I needed at that time in my life. So this was quite a few years ago. I was a high school soccer coach, and I was approached by a college to take over their soccer program, which was something I had been interested in for quite some time. I had big time visions of being a college soccer coach and successfully taking teams to big heights. However, this was not a Division I program. I'm not talking about like starting off at, coaching in the SEC or an ACC school. I'm talking about this is one of the lower tiers. And here's how it works in the college coaching business. You start low for many and you build your way up over time with success. And that's what I wanted to do. I absolutely wanted to be able to start low and just work. And I had self-belief, like I could pull together a program, build recruiting, and over time was going to be successful. However, my wife and I also wanted to be parents. And what we found was that was a lot more difficult than we thought. And over the course of a 2-year period, we had a lot of challenges. And over that course of period of time, what happened in my mind, in my pyramid of priorities, was things got flipped. All of a sudden, coaching went down a peg. The idea of becoming a father, because it was 2.5 years before we were successful, over that time, becoming a father went to the top, and rightly so. And oddly enough, when the opportunity came to coach at the college level, it was the same exact time when my wife and I were successful when we found out we were pregnant with our son. Well, my wife was pregnant with our son. Oddly enough, I always felt like this was a real opportunity for me to check my priorities. And it was at that moment I thought to myself, do I want to do this? I told the person who offered me the job to coach at college, I said, give me a couple days. This is something, this is an interesting time for our family, and I really need to dive into this with my wife and have some discussions and figure out what we want to do. It didn't involve a move, which was helpful, but what usually happens for these college coaches, you start, you have success over the couple years, then you move, and you move your family. And so then what do? I go to maybe a Division II job, and then I'm not going to be there forever. I want to go to Division I, so we'll move again. And at that point, when I started playing that out in my head and talking about that, I realized I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that to my son, to my wife. Basically drag them around the country while I chase this dream of mine. And who knows if I was going to be successful or not. There's no guarantees in that. And in the back of my mind, I thought about the stories of my father. My grandfather was a sergeant in the Air Force. And so my dad was, as a kid, taken across the country and lived in 12 different places before he was 15? Something ridiculous like that. And he would talk about how he'd get settled over the course of a year, make friends, and they'd move. Do it all again the following year. And I didn't want that for my kid. And when I had the time to reset my priorities, I realized the thing I want the most is to be a dad. I absolutely wanted to be a dad. And so that meant I was coaching at the high school level, which I was coaching boys in the fall and girls in the spring. Not only did I decide to not coach college, I decided to dial back a little bit on my coaching in general. And I only did the boys in the fall. So I stopped coaching the girls and I only did the boys. And then eventually, 5 years later, when we had twins, I was like, no, this is it. This is my time. And I hung up my high school coaching boots and I traded them in for kinder kicker coaching, which was an experience altogether as I went from tactical game planning to trying to herd cats, 4 and 5 year old cats running around the field, which was amazing. It was incredible in its own way, but not really where I thought I was going. So over the course of a 6-year span or more, I went from visions of being a college coach to now I'm coaching 5-year-olds. But it was maybe one of the hardest decisions that I'd ever gone through. And I say I'd ever made, but my wife and I, we made it together. My wife was really very supportive as she was like, I think you need to do this. She wanted me to go for the college job. And in the end, this was the right choice for me. And this was the right choice for my family, I should say. I realized because of that time period that had lapsed in those 2.5 years, my priority was being a dad, being a spouse and being a dad, and trying to be supportive for my kid. Luckily for us, that was the route we went, because not knowing then what I know now, our kids were headed for all kinds of challenges. And it started when my son turned 8 and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that took our family in a whole new trajectory. And I think now about if I was a college coach, how could I be handling all of that and trying to help my family? I just don't think it could happen. So back to the beginning, I said I needed a reset. This purposely gave me a chance to figure out my priorities. And being a dad, I've said this before, it's the most important job you're ever going to do. Period. End of discussion. In my pyramid, my family's at the top. And when I say my family, I mean my immediate family. But as difficult as all that was, that whole process purposely forced me to examine my priorities. And now, as somebody who still struggles with making sure that my priorities match up with what my list is, I often think back to that. And I often think about just the reminder of making sure my family's at the top of my pyramid. Now I've got work. I also do a bunch of different things with podcasting and run virtual summits and all kinds of things that I do with content creation, which I love, but can be time consuming, can take time away from the family. Those are things I have to think about. And along the way, since I've been doing all this podcast work in the last 5 years, there have been times where I'm like, you know what? I got to pause. I got to take a breather from this because we had things coming up, or I wanted to make sure that life, family, work balance didn't get all out of whack. We all need that reset period sometimes. It's like a seesaw. I think on one end, I'm sitting on one end, and then the balance of my life is on the other side of this seesaw, teeter-totter, whatever you call it. And there have been plenty of times when I feel like it is nowhere near balanced. and you got to go through this process. So I hope that conversation helps you a little bit. I understand this is not easy. Yes, we're all going to say family's at the top. Maybe your faith is up there with it, but it's harder to get our actions to match what we actually have as priorities. So just a reminder, if you find yourself getting pulled away from the things that are in the top of your list, it's time to hit the reset button and try to refocus and figure out a better balance or something that's closer to be balancing in your life. I appreciate you listening to this conversation. I hope you got something out of it. If you do me a favor, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening. Jump over to the YouTube channel, subscribe there, and get involved in the conversations. I have separate videos that are not exactly these audio form podcasts, although you can pick up this audio form podcast on YouTube as well. And if you really like the content I'm pushing out, share it with others. Share it with other dads, because if you're getting something out of it, I'm hoping they get something out of it too. Thanks again for listening. Hang in there, dads. I know it's not easy. It's challenging to say the least, but the rewards in the end outweigh the challenges, or at least I hope they do for you, because this is the most important job we're ever going to have, and our kids deserve that we put our full efforts into it. Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for sticking around. If you got any questions you want answered on the show, or you just want some feedback or want to share some ideas, shoot me an email, dadsallinpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a DM on any of the socials @rechargedfamily. Thanks for listening.